I assume you hear the music too.
Oh, I absolutely hear the music.
Excellent.
This is new for everyone. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
just for us, I suppose.
All right, everyone, whoever might be listening. Welcome to our Streamside chat. Mon-Chaio and I are experimenting with new formats, new ideas. And this one is, well, let's try this whole LinkedIn Live thing. Yeah, see what happens. And our idea is we'll just take something that's being talked about or been showing up in our feed, LinkedIn, wherever else, and just talk about it for 20 or 30 minutes and see what we get to. And if anyone comments, I believe we can see it. I don't think we can respond to comments in this. So we can't. Well, I mean, we can talk. We can see the comment and talk, but it gives any listeners an opportunity to control our tangents.
And will they show up on the Streamside chat, or is it like a LinkedIn thing, or I don't even know how this works?
So I think a LinkedIn comment, if someone is actually on the live stream, a comment on the stream will show up in our little studio here.
Okay, great.
I don't know if you see the comments. This is all new for me. I don't know what you see.
So some LinkedIn comments won't show a name or picture. Live viewer comments show up in the StreamYard. Okay.
All right.
Seems reasonable.
Yep. So,
well, and I think the other thing we'll add is the format is a little different. Obviously, it's a stream instead of just audio, but also I think given the time limits and given the types of articles we're going to be working with, I doubt we're going to bring much research into this. This is really going to be from our experience, our point of view. So a little bit different, right?
Yeah. And if we run dry on one article, we'll just choose another.
Or stop going live and just end it.
Or just end it then. Just like, okay, that happened. All right.
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking today about a post on LinkedIn by Jonathan Smart. I have no idea how to get people to know what we're talking about since we can't post a comment.
Can we? Oh, there's a present function.
There is a present function. So maybe I can present that. Present. I can share my screen. Oh, let's see what happens. Share screen. I can share a Chrome tab. That's probably the best.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, I don't know which. Oh, nope, it's not that one. Yeah, it's not that one. I have too many LinkedIn tabs open.
That's okay. I can do this. I can.
It's this one. I got it.
You got it. Okay.
So this is the LinkedIn post that we're looking at by Jonathan Smart. Just reading it out. Improving ways of working is 80% culture, 20% process with a focus on the outcomes. And it's just a little cartoon, not too much to it. I was actually just before we started here, Mon-Chaio, noticing that the cartoon says soonersaferhappier.com. And I looked that up. Mm-hmm. That's a consulting firm that does Agile transformations. Well, based on this little cartoon, probably not too much transformations. They probably try to do it in other ways. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan Smart is one of the founders of it. So that's the context on that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So what's you sent this to me, Mon-Chaio. It kind of came up on your radar. What caught your eye? Why did you say, well, let's talk about this one? You sent me multiple of them, and this is actually the one I chose. So, but what caused you to send it to me?
Well, I liked it because we see this a lot where people really focus on the process. And it's not just Agile. I mean, both Andy and I are Agile people, at least at our roots. But I don't know about you, Andy. I've sort of moved away from the Agile world a little bit in terms of what would you call it, like the improvements and the different methodologies in Agile as they're evolving. So this specifically says this gentleman is here to install Agile, right? But yeah, I think it's for many different process improvements. If you take a look at the way I would say most consultancy works, or at least most consultancies that I've seen work. It's a lot of this. People bring in consultants to say, hey, can you help me solve this one problem? And it's usually some sort of process problem. I have too many bugs. I don't know how to do a retrospective or a bug, a retrospective on production outages. My specs don't seem to be going well, and engineers don't seem to be writing code that meets the specs. Those are all sort of process-based things. And what I see often is people bring them in and they say, hey, here's the quote unquote process guy coming to fix our thing. But I really do agree that that's not the best way to affect change. And I think, like we say in a lot of our culture stuff, you build upon a foundation of culture. And if you don't have the right culture, or if you don't know how to affect culture, your process changes aren't really going to make a bunch of difference. So that's why I sent it to you.
Yeah. Have you ever been a participant or victim of an agile transformation? I've never. Well, other than the ones that I instigated as a developer, or well, not as a manager, because I knew the team. They didn't need a transformation. So
let me think. I want to say no, but I think I have in smaller cases. When I was at Microsoft, actually, they tried to get rid of they got rid of the QA team as part of a purported agile transformation, moving all of the QA engineers to be devs.
That was, I think that was actually mentioned. Was that mentioned on this one as one of the comments of getting rid of QA?
I don't think I saw that.
No, might have been thinking of something else I was reading recently about getting. Oh no, I know what it was. It was another LinkedIn article, someone responding to something else, and it was about getting rid of all of the QAs. Yeah, but how did that go? Like, did it change the organization for the better? Did it achieve the goals?
No, not really. I think it achieved the goal of getting rid of the QA people.
Oh well,
and
okay.
And it made people feel better about the fact that we were trying to move more towards automated testing and away from a lot of manual testing, right? So, and that did happen. We wrote more automated tests, and given the fact that there weren't people specifically designed to do manual testing, we did less manual testing. But I don't know if we could say that the quality necessarily improved, or that the regressions were reduced, or anything like that. And we certainly didn't affect the cultural change, right? What is the cultural change that we would think to affect with a process change like this? I would say, at least from my perspective, it's something around the fact that quality is everyone's problem, that it can't be tested out in the end, that we should reduce manual things that can't be done manually, or sorry, that's not right. We should reduce the things that can be automated instead of continuing to do them manually. And even though I think the last part happened in terms of the process, I don't think any of that culture came about from the process change.
Yeah. Because you can imagine they were, well, the cynical view that I have is that they were told, hey, you don't need testers if you do this right, which is not necessarily true. It can be true, not always true. And you'll have a much higher quality product. And they probably also looked at it and said, oh, we get to reduce headcount. But to your point, Mon-Chaio, just instituting that doesn't cause all of the other changes. And it's those other changes that get everyone working in the way that is more effective. And so you started this out by saying, like, we had been kind of in the Agile community. We had been kind of paying attention stuff. I kind of step in and out every once in a while. I was never in like the Agile community to the point of going to the Agile conferences. But I kind of got bored with it because it moved from a community of people, for the most part, not entirely. I don't want to label everyone that's still in paying attention and labels themselves as part of the Agile community in this way. But my sense is that it started moving away from being a community of problems to a community of solutions. And to me, the thing that made it work early on was that focus on problems, that focus on, well, let's just try something to see if we can make this better. Let's see if we can
Mhm.
solve this problem. And what this little comic strip is getting at to me is that when you take those solutions that a community of problems comes up with, and then a community of solutions takes them on, they don't care about the problems, really. It sounds strange, but they don't really care about the problem. They care about implement this solution.
Mhm.
They kind of, if you use the crossing the chasm model for this, you've got the early adopters and the kind of radical people who are there because they have a problem that they want to solve, and they're just going to try things out, and that's their culture. Their culture is not Agile. Their culture is not XP. Their culture is not TDD. They're just like, I just want to find things that make this work, make this better. And sometimes it's just, I want to try something new. But then
Mhm.
at some point it crosses that chasm and it gets into the early majority and then the late majority. And they're not there necessarily to solve the problem. They're there to not be left behind.
Mhm.
And so what ends up happening, I believe, in a lot of organizations is that someone who probably does want to solve a problem says, hey, let's get these practices in here. Let's solve this problem. But then you have the cultural um, dynamics around that organization, around that person who brought them in, which is probably more along the lines of the early majority and late majority, which is, I just don't want to be left behind.
Mhm.
And that's not a cultural change then. That is not a change, not even necessarily in process. The process is just a series of steps that they go through to not get left behind. But they haven't changed their mindset. And so they're still not going to make different decisions. So the same decision-making process that they used is still in place.
Right. Absolutely. It brings two things to my mind. One is often the person initiating the change has the right, maybe not the right mindset, but definitely the right intentions. The problem is when you've identified a solution, you bring in a solutioner, that person is there to implement that solution. The classic, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail type of thing, right? So,
Speaking of which, yesterday I was hammering a screw into place.
because you didn't have a screwdriver.
No, it's because I stripped it and I couldn't get it out, so I had to hammer it out.
Oh man. And what were you building this time? Was it still your toolbox?
No, my toolbox is mostly done. Sorry, this is another tangent. My toolbox is mostly done. I'm building right now an outdoor kind of little shelving unit with a cat house in it.
Oh
You
my
know, like a
goodness.
dog house, but it's a cat
Yeah.
house. So
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Getting back on topic though. Um, we definitely see this, I think, or at least I see this a lot in Agile, but even within the companies themselves, I feel like people don't really, and we talk about this a lot, people don't really understand what culture is, and people don't really understand how to change culture. And they think they do. So they use sort of these process improvements to change it. And a big one that I've seen is leadership using changes in the performance review process
yep,
in
yep.
order to try to change culture. And I've actually been a part of a couple companies now where that's been done. And I've also been lucky enough to be at the stages of these companies where they used to be small and they were growing, or they used to be medium, but they were growing even larger than that. And what I notice in that is they often use these performance review processes in order to try to keep the small company culture. This idea of, for example, we value bottoms up idea generation. We
Mm,
value impact. We value, whatever the case may be, right? We value disruptive work, that sort of thing.
hmm
Um, the problem is, or at least the problem that I've seen is then they grow and they go out and hire and they bring in a lot of these people from a lot of larger companies in the area and in tech in general. And those people come with a predetermined culture and mindset that they've developed as well. And so when that influx of new culture comes in, I have never really seen the process be able to mediate that behavior very well. And so even though the process says we value disruptive innovation, when you come down to it and you read all of these yearly reviews for people, you have managers and managers and managers and tiers of managers now that came from companies where they didn't value disruptive innovation. And so the types of disruptive innovation that they're pointing out, or the things that they're giving credit for disruption, is not really what the company ended up intending. So as an example, their disruption might be, oh, I redid the bug review process so that every Jira ticket is now tracked to something else ticket, right? Or now that, I made it so that every one-on-one notes gets tracked in a central system, something like that, right? And they would call that disruptive. And for leaders, it's difficult because as your organization grows, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, or even bigger in size, it's very rare that you can go down to the lower levels and say, hey, this particular performance review, that's not what I meant by disruptive. And especially as the numbers grow, you might go down, you're like, wow, 80% of them are now not what I intended, but I can't change 80% of them now. And so it's not that bad. It's mainly disruptive, but like, let me make another process change and hopefully that will start to drive those down. So I've definitely seen that in non-agile situations as well.
Right. So you get change after change after change as they think, well, that's not quite what I wanted. That's not quite what I wanted. And each change starts, I've heard it called like the whiplash effect. Each change starts happening, and as it's course corrected, it amplifies how much of an effect it has. And people start whipping around trying to figure out what is it that they're supposed to be doing now. And but probably disrupts the culture even more.
Yeah, even without the whiplash effect, I think the more insidious thing, I think when you have the whiplash effect, sometimes it gets large enough where the leader then makes a sort of huge change, right? They say, stop, we're going to, fire everybody now and bring everybody in, or we're going to completely reshape. Usually it's a reorg. We're going to reorganize this under a leader who has been here since the beginning, who's been able to introduce change or whatever the case may be. But I think even more insidious than that is the slow erosion of the culture, where leaders look and they say, it's pretty much the same. And these things are small. And so I'm just going to let them go. But they end up eroding and eroding and eroding until at some point when you look at it, the facade still looks the same, but the core is quite different and doesn't really support the facade. And I think go ahead.
I was going to say there's an interesting kind of thought exercise that I've heard. I think it's called the miracle question. And the idea is, okay, say that to like cultural change or to the impact of these change activities. Say you have a problem, and you want it to be solved, or say there's some issue and you want it to be solved, or you want it to be better. And the idea is a miracle occurs during the night. You're asleep, you wake up, and it's been resolved. And the question is, you walk into the office, or you get online if you're a remote work team. What do you notice that's different? Now, the simple, uninteresting answer is, oh, I don't see that problem anymore. The more interesting answer is, what do you see instead? So it's because you can't see the absence of something. So it's what do you see instead? So for like putting in that new promotion process, what do you see happening? What do you see that tells you that this has worked? And why is it different? So that's the miracle question. And I think, going back to this article a little bit, I think in a lot of people's imaginations, they say, oh, I'm going to resolve this issue. And what I see when I wake up in the morning, how many of them do you think would say, I see people in daily stand-ups?
Unfortunately, I think unless they were pushed, probably a lot of them.
You think so?
I think a lot of the challenge is people don't really get down to that next level. They think they see success in the facade processes that are implemented. I think most people can, but they have to be coached down and say, no, beyond that, why?
Yeah. Or what is it that's happening there that tells you, because that's the key. It's not that you see them doing stand-ups.
Right.
It's you wanted to resolve an issue. What is it about those stand-ups that you just mentioned that tells you that the issue is resolved?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I say that because I can see, like, if I channel other folks that I've worked with or consulted with previously, I could hear in my mind their voices saying things like, well, it is daily stand-up because I see people there and the sprint board gets updated and I can see that things are moving and I know where the project progress is. But that's just like the very top level.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's not that conversation around, well, I see that people are talking. They weren't talking before. Or I see that certain issues used to take a lot longer to resolve, but now they're brought out into the open. There's more transparency quicker. And so I see them resolve quicker.
Yeah. Or the thing that I notice when I come in the morning is I know the status of where we are on our deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
I walk in and someone tells me, hey, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to do next. And
Right.
I understand it. That might be the miracle. I understand what they've just told me. Might be the miracle.
I didn't used to, but now I do. I actually want to get to one of the comments here because I actually do think this is important. So there's a comment in here. Should I read out the name? This is our first time doing this. I don't know if this is the right way to do things. Should we call out the names or should we?
I have no idea. Should I?
Should you even scroll? Whatever.
Should I even scroll? I don't know. It's publicly on LinkedIn. This will be on LinkedIn.
Exactly. Okay. So let me just read the comment. I'm not going to call out the name. If you're interested, you can read the name, I suppose. The comment says, the problem, as you well know, is that culture takes years to change. We start with practices, establish principles, and the culture emerges over time. As culture takes root, practices can evolve based on the principles that exemplify the generative culture we're trying to cultivate. Changed behavior leads to changed outcomes, leads to changed thinking. So what do you think about that?
Changed behavior leads to changed outcomes, leads to changed thinking. I'm not an expert in CBT, but it does seem aligned with CBT.
My wife is a clinical psychiatrist. Psychiatrist. She said yes. She whispered yes in my ear. So you're right, Andy.
I think the thing I don't actually fully agree with is how much time people think that takes. I think that it actually can happen fairly quickly. And so I think there is a way of, by impacting behavior, you can impact thinking. But I think you can also impact thinking a bit more directly, especially on these kinds of things, by talking about the ways of thinking about things. But it has to. But I think they have to come hand in hand. If you just tell people about new ways of thinking, that's usually not going to really change their behavior. And if you just tell them a new behavior without giving them any framework for the thinking that goes along with that behavior, the thinking also won't change. In fact, they'll be in this weird disconnect thing where they're doing one thing and they're thinking another thing, and it probably just won't work very well. But if you give them both a way of thinking and a new behavior, I think it can go pretty quickly. I don't know. Is that what you were thinking about on this one, or what was your thought?
Yeah, I was going to add one other thing, but I'm glad you mentioned this because I hadn't really thought about it in this way before. I agree with what you said. I think going back to our daily stand-up example, it's just on the top of my mind. Otherwise, I would use a leadership example. But going back to the daily stand-up example, yes, it is true. If you just tell people you are going to be doing daily stand-ups, that behavior in and of itself brings people together every day. And bringing people together every day regardless of whether you tell them, hey, you need to facilitate more communication, probably facilitates more communication. So even if you don't give them that thought around what you're doing, just saying, hey, be here, write code like this, align your promotion documents to this template, use these words and don't use these words in your promo docs. All of that can affect cultural change, right? And you might say it's slow, it might be fast. I don't know. I think it's fairly slow, is my opinion. Then you can layer on top of that, Andy, what you said, which is change the way they think about it. Give them the why behind it. Question them. Something you mentioned in our cultural episode, sort of introduce error into their system. Be like, you did it this way, it didn't work, right? Now here's a new way to think about things. Now think about things different and try it again and see if you have a new way of doing things. And by the way, here's a thing that you could try doing, right? So that can speed up change.
Yeah.
But
and in fact, using the stand-up as an example, if they go into it and they have no mental model put around it about why are they doing this, they will start talking more. They kind of have to. Well, they don't really have to. You can get really weird stand-ups happening. But if you start putting in a bit of a different way of thinking about it, and you reinforce it through the behavior change, and that different way of thinking, to me, stand-ups are less about communication and more about collaboration. That C word, that terrible C word that we've talked about before. And the point of a stand-up is to realize that they can help each other. And if they go into it never thinking that the point of a stand-up is to figure out how they can help each other, then they're going to go into it ignoring each other. And yes, words will be happening, but they won't have changed their philosophy. They won't change their way of thinking. And they just keep doing the same thing, which is everyone sits off in their little corner, working on their thing, not paying attention that they're actually constructing broken code for the rest of their team, getting upset when it turns out that someone calls them out and says, hey, you just keep breaking this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and this isn't a live on like what stand-ups should be, but yeah, it's not just that they want to help each other, they must help each other, I think is what we would say around the collaboration. It's forced collaboration. It's the requirement to help each other. And I've implemented things like this in the past where I said, look, like everything has to have two people on it. I don't care what it is. Go partner with this person to figure out how to do things. And then without the thought model that's right, or I've given them the thought model, like it's important that two people collaborate. We need to reduce error, right? We need to reduce silo effect. And still people will come back with the cultural thing that they know, which is, oh, I'm doing these 4 things. This person's doing these 5 things, and we're coming together in 2 weeks. Like, but they're like, no, we talked about this,
Yeah, we're both cool with this.
Yeah, we vetted it, we vetted our thinking process. So like to your point around, we need to think about it, get more eyes on it. We have eyes on it. We did it. Now we're just going to go off and do it. So I do think that that both the behavior thing is important as well as the thought process change is different. But I do agree actually with this comment that culture generally takes a long time to change. And I think that because most people would be familiar with the behavior change part, and maybe fewer people would be familiar with the thought process change part of it. But still, I would say generally people are familiar with those two. I actually think that takes a while, especially in larger organizations. If you're 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 person organization, that's a lot.
Yeah, propagating it around and keeping it consistent through that whole propagation. Yeah, that will take time and effort.
Right. So if you're the leader of that size of an organization, what do? Right? You say, okay, well, I'm going to try to, like, I'm the culture champion and I know what's going to happen. I have 7 VPs reporting to me, and each of them have 6 directors reporting to them, or whatever the case may be. Now, how do you propagate that down to each individual person? And so this is, I think, where a lot of these leaders of these large organizations miss the point, which is, yes, if those are the only two tools you have, you're going to lean on them, and yes, change is going to be slow. But there are other tools to create wholesale top-down culture change that can result in much, much faster culture change. Maybe not as stable And so you have to marry it with the bottoms up too. It can't just be the top down stuff. But if you ignore the top down stuff, and I would say most people ignore it because they don't understand it. That's why we did 3 hours on culture, and because there's so much that I don't think people even know, the terminology, the tactics around it. And so that's why people don't do it, because they don't know it. And so it's ignored. And I think that's why most people think culture change is slow, because they're only actioning it bottoms up via the 2 tools that you talked about.
Right. That culture change hasn't happened until everyone has done it, and you can only do it when everyone is kind of doing the same thing already.
Well, and especially if you're hiring, right? Like we talked about the importance of hiring for culture, but imagine if you have a 5,000 person organization, you're trying to push culture down, and that organization is growing by 10% a month. Like the rate of incoming culture is going to swallow all of that bottoms up culture propagation that's happening faster than it can propagate.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So does that mean that you would agree with the guy's other comment, which is maybe culture is a bit like trust? It takes a long time to build, but can be destroyed overnight. I would say, in reading that, one of my thoughts is the framing of culture that of something that can be destroyed. I actually disagree with that. I don't like that way of thinking about it.
Okay.
And I don't like that way of thinking about it because culture is simply a thing that is and changes. And if you think about it as something that can be destroyed, you start thinking about it as though it's this thing that has to be preciously protected, and any deviation from that is a bad thing.
Gotcha.
And to me, that starts leading down troubling paths that also make you blind to the fruitfulness of variation and looking for that. Not to say that that means that all, like, everyone doing something different is a good thing, but that framing of it can be destroyed, it can be grown, that something that alters culture or alters your perception of what is happening in your organization is somehow bad, that it's destroying. Because here's the other side of that: if it can be destroyed overnight, that means it can be changed overnight. I think it's that there are particular changes that are more difficult than others, and partly that's because we have such need to, when we want to do them, the desire is that everyone is doing the same thing, thinking that same way, and that's what's really difficult.
Right.
It's easier to diverge than it is to converge on this.
Right. I agree with you on that. I think we talked about trust in our trust episodes, right? So when you're at the most basic level of trust, I believe trust can be destroyed overnight. We talked about how easy it is, right? You take one thing which wasn't what you expected, a promise that was broken, and all of a sudden that's done. Culture isn't like that. There are no levels of culture. Culture is, like you were saying, it is whatever is, that is culture. That is the culture there. And you can have the cultural values that you wish you had, and you could be diverging from them. Now, that's both can be a good thing and can be a bad thing. We don't have time here to talk about it, and we've already spent 3 hours talking about it. So go listen to those episodes.
Yeah. We talked about that quite a bit in terms of the kind of like the espouse theory in use. That divergence is a thing to notice and not necessarily a problem, but it's a thing to notice and something you can learn from, and you can decide what to do with it.
That's right. That's right. And that's not to say that you don't have a culture that you want, right? That's the espoused theory that you were talking about. And that may be good, and you might be diverging from it. And that might be bad, but it's not always bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes the divergence is, oh, I learned something new.
Yeah.
And that's better, right?
Yeah. The divergence is, it's happening because those things that we desired to be weren't working for us. And so in our quest to be better, we found this other set of things, and it's now different from what we espouse. Let's reevaluate that. Let's espouse something different, perhaps.
Right.
So we've gone 35 minutes, Mon-Chaio. We are great at rambling, even when we try not to.
Right. But what should we do at the end of this, Andy? I don't know if tactics are right at the end of things like this. Feels like,
I don't think so. I think I enjoyed this. I enjoyed just kind of like grabbing something and talking about it. I feel like we don't need to hold ourselves to that stricter structure of let's give people tactics. They can just listen in and be put to sleep by our voices.
Right.
Which
Someone
is
told you that, right? That your voice.
Yeah, it's one bit of feedback I got was that they found my voice very soothing and they could go to sleep.
All right. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this. Well, nobody's listening right now, I don't think, but maybe people find it on their feed and we'll give it a listen or whatnot. We'll certainly tag Jonathan and maybe Jonathan Smart, the author of the post, and maybe some of the commenters, because the whole point of this is to generate discussion. Like, if you disagree with us, let us know. We'd love to talk to you about it. We'd love to learn from you, right? Have our opinions changed and our insights changed by your insights. So let us know. And if you want us to do more of these, let us know. I think we'll try them for a while, see how they go.
Yeah. Don't know what the cadence is going to be yet, but we'll see. Keep on the lookout. It probably will happen again.
Yeah. And and one other thing is, if you see something on your feed and you're like, these two people should talk about it, ping it over to us.
Yeah. Send it to us. All right. Now I need to learn how to stop this. Well, the very first thing that's important is that I get the music going. There we go. And then I think I click end stream.
Okay.